Japan has just crossed a symbolic and strategic threshold, with the approval of a defense budget exceeding 9 trillion yen for the upcoming fiscal year. The country has entered a new phase in its approach to national security. This decision is not simply about spending more money on defense. It reflects a deeper reassessment of Japan's strategic environment, its responsibilities within regional alliances, and the limits of a security posture that was shaped in a very different era. The newly approved budget represents the largest defense allocation in Japan's post-war history. At approximately 9.03 trillion yen, it marks a steady continuation of a multi-year upward trajectory that began in the early 2020s. Only a few years ago, Japan's defense spending hovered around 6 trillion yen, constrained by an informal ceiling of roughly 1% of gross domestic product. Today, that ceiling has been decisively abandoned. Tokyo is now moving deliberately toward a defense expenditure level equivalent to 2% of gross domestic product, a benchmark long associated with NATO members and collective burden sharing among advanced military powers. For Japanese audiences, the central question is not whether the number itself is large, but why this shift has become unavoidable. The answer lies in the convergence of three realities: a deteriorating regional security environment, evolving alliance expectations, and the growing recognition that deterrence requires credible capabilities rather than declaratory restraint alone. From the perspective of Japan's strategic planners, the regional picture has become increasingly complex. Military activity around the Taiwan Strait has intensified. Ballistic missile testing on the Korean Peninsula continues to challenge regional stability, and the maritime and air domains surrounding Japan's southwestern islands are more contested than at any point in recent decades. These developments have direct implications for Japan's security, particularly given its geography, reliance on sea lines of communication, and proximity to potential flashpoints. Against this backdrop, the new defense budget prioritizes capabilities that are explicitly designed to enhance deterrence rather than symbolic presence. A significant portion of funding is allocated to so-called standoff weapons, including extended-range missile systems that allow the self-defense forces to hold adversary assets at risk from greater distances. This marks a notable evolution from Japan's traditional focus on point defense and interception toward a posture that emphasizes the ability to impose costs in the event of aggression. Equally important is the emphasis on integrated air and missile defense, unmanned systems, and networked command and control. Investments in large numbers of unmanned aerial, surface, and underwater platforms reflect lessons drawn from recent conflicts, where mass, persistence, and information dominance have proven as decisive as individual high-end platforms. For Japan, unmanned systems offer a way to enhance coverage of vast maritime areas while managing personnel constraints in a rapidly aging society. Another critical dimension of the budget is resilience. Funding for ammunition stockpiles, hardened infrastructure, cyber defense, and space-based surveillance addresses long-standing vulnerabilities that had been acknowledged but underfunded for years. These investments may attract less public attention than new missiles or aircraft, yet they are central to Japan's ability to sustain operations in a prolonged contingency and to function effectively within a coalition framework. Alliance dynamics also play a crucial role in understanding the logic of the budget increase. The security relationship between Japan and the United States remains the cornerstone of regional deterrence, but expectations within the alliance have evolved. Washington has made it clear that credible deterrence in the Indo-Pacific requires greater contributions from allies, not only in terms of spending levels, but also in operational integration and capability development. By aligning its defense expenditure with the 2% of gross domestic product benchmark, Japan signals both political commitment and strategic seriousness to its partners. At the same time, the shift reflects a growing desire in Tokyo for greater strategic autonomy within the alliance. Increased investment in domestic defense industries, particularly in missile technology, unmanned systems, and advanced sensors, is intended to reduce over-reliance on foreign suppliers and ensure that Japan can adapt rapidly to changing operational requirements. This does not imply a move away from alliance cooperation, but rather a recalibration toward a more balanced and resilient partnership. Domestically, the budget has sparked debate, and rightly so. Japan faces profound demographic and fiscal challenges, including rising social security costs, a shrinking workforce, and long-term pressure on public finances. For many citizens, the question is whether sustained increases in defense spending will crowd out essential social investment. The government's response has been to frame defense not as a competing priority, but as a prerequisite for national stability and economic security. Without credible deterrence, policymakers argue, the foundations of Japan's prosperity would be far more vulnerable to external shocks and coercion. Public opinion in Japan remains cautious but pragmatic. Surveys suggest that while there is no broad enthusiasm for militarization, there is growing acceptance that the regional environment has changed in ways that cannot be ignored. The historical legacy of the post-war period continues to shape debate, particularly regarding constitutional constraints and the definition of defensive action. As a result, political leaders have taken care to emphasize transparency, civilian oversight, and the defensive rationale behind new capabilities, seeking to maintain public trust while advancing necessary reforms. Looking ahead, the implications of this budget extend well beyond the next fiscal year. By the early 2030s, Japan is likely to possess a markedly different force structure, one with greater reach, deeper stockpiles, more robust command networks, and a higher degree of interoperability with allied forces. This transformation will not happen overnight, but the trajectory is now clearly established. The challenge will be to ensure that capability growth is matched by strategic discipline and diplomatic engagement. In the broader regional context, Japan's choices will inevitably influence the strategic calculations of other actors. A more capable and confident Japan may strengthen deterrence and contribute to stability, but it will also require careful signaling to avoid misperception or unintended escalation. This places a premium on dialogue, confidence-building measures, and continued engagement with regional partners, even as defense capabilities expand. In this sense, the 9 trillion yen defense budget is best understood not as an endpoint, but as a waypoint. It represents a conscious decision by Japan to adapt to a more contested and uncertain security environment, while remaining anchored in its post-war principles. For Japanese audiences, the significance lies not only in how much is being spent, but in how clearly the country is redefining its role in safeguarding peace, stability, and national autonomy in the decades ahead.